Thank you so much.
Yes.
So Rachel, are we live on YouTube now?
Yes.
That's what I have. Okay. I'm going to turn my camera off for a few minutes.
Yes, if people want to turn their videos off, that's Hi, Madeline. It's Blunt.
How are you?
I just want to let you know I can't see the chat, so I'll just turn it off at 5 of or when someone says we're about to get started, okay?
Okay.
I said hi and everything and asked you how you were feeling and realized I was muted.
Hi, are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Hi. I'm okay. We've been moving, my partner and I, to a new apartment.
Yeah.
And
Just sorry, before you guys keep talking, I just want to tell you that we are live on YouTube right now.
I'm moving. It was great.
Okay, thank you for telling me that.
Yeah. So you guys, yeah, I mean, you know, you could talk to each other if you want, but
I want to see oh, there you are. I wanted to see your face.
I'm here.
Oh, I did not dress up really great for this, everybody. So if you're watching,
you look great.
I feel like I haven't seen you in forever.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Hey, Lorelai, can I click start webinar to let people? Okay, just saying that.
Yeah.
I'm living for this pink.
I know.
Like,
Look at that.
It caught my eye as soon as I saw it, got on here. I was like, oh my God, I miss dyeing my hair.
It was good.
Yeah. Wait, are we talking about you or me?
You or you? I both of you.
Because Femi, your hair looks great. That's, I mean, you know.
Yeah, I do the
Nobody
braid.
talks about mine.
I do the braid now because like my hair was like, I'm just like ADHD real bad with like keeping up with my hair when it's bleached.
Yeah.
And it just started to look really terrible. So I just cut it all off and I was like, I'm just gonna do braids with color now.
They look great.
Pretty.
Thank you.
Oh.
Okay, I'm gonna turn my video off for a couple more minutes.
Okay.
We're starting officially at 4:05.
Okay.
And there's probably people
104.
already,
Yeah.
just so you know.
Hi, everybody.
But you know, you can
Yeah.
feel free to keep talking. Sorry.
People are entering and want to introduce themselves in the chat, they're welcome to from the audience.
Oh, okay. Do I see chat somewhere or no?
Yeah, you should have chat.
Oh, there it is. Ah, got it. Yay. Okay.
It's okay. It's all right.
Hi.
I know.
Amazing. Yay, so many people.
Yeah.
Oh,
Phaedra.
Jesus.
You
It's
better
already
be-
over 100.
Wow. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Look at all these
Hi,
people.
England.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Hi, Seattle. I feel like I'm in a webcam show.
I know, I was thinking the same thing.
Hi, Denver. What's your request?
Yeah.
Hi, Carolyn.
I know.
Hi, Jenny.
Oh my God,
Oh
I
my
just
gosh.
did
Wait.
something and now I can't see you guys.
Oh
I'm
no.
sorry. Wait, I've got it. Wow, Australia's here.
Yay. Hi, Australia. Fuck yeah. Can I swear?
Yeah, of course you can swear. Sorry.
Hi, Antonia. Cool. New Zealand.
Oh, Antonia, hi.
Hello, Chris, you very online queer. I love that.
Yes.
Are we ready to get started in a minute, Lorelai?
Oh yeah, I am not watching the time. Yes,
Okay.
you can start.
I'm ready if you are. Okay, great.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm just moving the chat. Welcome. Welcome to the first event in the 2-week-long conference, Informal, Criminalized, Precarious, Sex Workers Organizing Against Barriers. My name is Lorelai Lee, and I'm a sex worker activist, a writer, an organizer. And I'm a co-founder of the Disabled Sex Workers Coalition, a founding member of both the Upstate New York Sex Workers Coalition and Decrim Massachusetts, a researcher and analyst with Hacking Hustling, and a Justice Catalyst Fellow at the Cornell Gender Justice Clinic. The Sex Workers Organizing Against Barriers Conference is co-facilitated by the Disabled Sex Workers Coalition, Hacking Hustling, Cornell Law School Gender Justice Clinic, Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard, and the Center for Information Technology and Public Life at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I am so appreciative of the conference co-organizers, some of whom you'll see their little squares are here today. Rachel Kuo, Danielle Blunt, Zara Stardust, and Tiffany So. And I'm also so appreciative of our co-sponsors, the Berger International Legal Studies Program, the Dorothy S. Clark Program in Feminist Jurisprudence, the Cornell Labor Law Clinic, the Cornell student chapters of Outlaw, National Lawyers Guild, Women's Law Coalition, and the Black Law Students Association, Justice Catalyst, the Red Umbrella Fund, and the Asian American Feminist Collective. Special thanks also to Naomi Loren, Eves, and Alexis Briggs for all of your work and support. As you can tell, I think this conference was born out of a lot of collective work and a lot of collective dreaming. Thank you also to all of you who've donated via the Eventbrite page. Our co-sponsors and our public donations ensure that we can follow one of our core ethics in this organizing, which is to pay people for their labor, in particular sex worker organizers whose labor often goes unrecognized and unfunded. For each of the conference panels, live closed captioning and streaming to YouTube is available, and recordings and transcripts will be available afterwards at hackinghustling.org, where you can also find a schedule of each of the events in the conference, and we'll also have on the site the donation links for all of our panelists who have links like that, where you can go to support their work. Our community agreements are adapted from the Asian American feminist collective Brave Space, Collective Sex, Alt Div Hummingbirds, and By Us For Us, and are as follows. 1, to bring in our histories and speak from our own experiences. 2nd, to be committed to each other's collective learning and growing. 3rd, to be open to learning. 4th, to respect the diversity of our identities, and particularly for the purposes of this conference, that includes not assuming the identities of organizers and activists for whom sharing every element of our lived experience is not always safe. And so people might not share with you the fact that they have lived experience on something that they're speaking about. So we make no assumptions. 5th, to practice not using ableist language. 6th, to prioritize care for ourselves and others. And this last agreement in particular is a disability justice issue. And both our panelists and our audience members should feel free to do whatever you need to do to care for yourselves during this conference, including standing up, moving around, lying down, or even disengaging from any of the events at any time. We have panelists in this conference, I am pretty sure from every continent except Antarctica, which I'm very excited about. And many of our panelists are zooming in from North America or Australia, where we are living on stolen land that is still and always Indigenous land. To learn more about the land that you're living on, you can look at the resources provided by the Native Governance Center, which are available at nativegov.org. Today's panel is called Sex Work as Work and Sex Work as Anti-Work, and will be a conversation centering disabled sex workers. Our event today will feature about 60 minutes of conversation with our speakers, and then we'll open up the floor to Q&A. So you guys in the audience, you're welcome to use the Q&A or chat features on Zoom to ask questions at any time during the panel, and we'll answer as many of them as we can get to at the end. And so, to introduce our amazing speakers today, Femi Babylon, formerly known as Supreme Bay, is a gender fluid bike, Hoodoo American, and erotic labor theorist who coined pro-ho womanist and pro-hoism. In 2018, she won a grant from the Party Noir Collective and went on to publish Libra Season, which is a beautiful book. I highly recommend you all get it. You can get it on Amazon. Known as Thought Scholar on Twitter, she catapulted into the realm of notorious on social media by tweeting about poverty, erotic labor, race, reproductive justice, and bisexuality. A born and bred Midwestern genius. Absolutely, I can attest to that. Her words have been published in Vice, Wear Your Voice, Autostraddle, Afropunk, and Yale University's LPE blog. That's the Law and Political Economy blog. She's also a member of the SWAP USA Board of Directors, and her work is available at thoughtscholar.com. Madeline Marlowe has been a sex worker activist since 2013 and a professional dominatrix for nearly 2 decades. She's been producing porn since 2005 and is currently based in Las Vegas. And Kitty Milford is a sex worker and disability justice activist. She is working on a book about abolition and disability justice, which includes a chapter on disability and sex work. She's also a founding member of the Upstate New York Sex Workers Coalition, and she's based in Central New York State. I am really sad to share with you that Jaylani Maple will not be able to join us today. She's had a death in her family this week. And for those of you who don't know Jaylani's work, she is a brilliant speaker, thinker, and organizer. She's with Whose Corner Is It Anyway in Decrim, Massachusetts, and I highly recommend following those organizations to learn more about Jaylani's work. And I also want to especially thank Jaylani for her help in developing the questions in this panel. So to start, just to share a little bit about where I come to this panel from. I wanted to hold this panel because as a disabled sex worker, I personally have had a somewhat conflicted with relationship with the most prevalent slogan in our movement, sex work is work. So that slogan is often used to assert that sex work is labor, which I absolutely align with that. But it's also sometimes used to suggest that we deserve rights or legitimacy specifically because we are workers rather than because we are people, for example. So this is a conversation that Femi and I have had many times, and I wanted us to just dig a little deeper into that tension today. Sex worker Carol Lee coined the term sex work in 1979 or 1980, she can't remember which year it was, when she was at a feminist conference where they were having a workshop on what they called the sex use industry. Carol describes this in Whores and Other Feminists, which is a sex work classic. And she says, how could I sit amid other women as a political equal when I was being objectified like that, described only as something used, obscuring my role as an actor and an agent in that transaction. So here we are 40 years later, and the term sex work is so prevalent. And so my first question for the panelists is, what does that term mean to you now? Has it been useful to you? And also you could answer the question, what does sex work as work mean to you? And I guess I'm gonna just call on you guys for ease of flow. And so I think this is alphabetical. We'll go with Femi first.
Why do I always have to go first?
I don't know, it's alphabetical.
I should have gone with Supreme May. Anyway. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
One more
So
time.
the question is, here we are 40 years after the invention of the term sex work. And my question is, has that term been useful to you? What does it mean to you now? And also you could answer, what does sex work as work, the slogan, mean to you?
Okay, all right. Sorry, you guys know I have ADHD, so I kind of was staring and spaced out for a second. But I've actually been crowing a lot about this on Twitter for years.
Mm-hmm.
And I ruffled a lot of feathers when I first started talking about this, because, oh, stop it. Hi, PJ. And so I think we have the same birthday. We're so special. But sorry. So yeah, I've been talking about sex work mostly because I noticed, okay, so I grew up in Milwaukee and I live in Chicago now. So I'm very Midwestern, working class and everything like that. And my mom was a teacher. And I never heard the term sex work before I got online.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard it from other strippers. I never heard it from other hoes. I never heard that shit. But the first time I heard the term or saw the term was in academic papers, and in this book that I read. I just saw this the other day and I can't remember the title now. It has a white cover and it has a black leg on it and it has yellow and pink letters, and it's about the lusty lady or something like that or whatever. I don't know. It's in my history on Amazon. I'll find it. But anyway, I read that book and I really liked the book. I really liked the story and everything like that. But I noticed when I was looking for more and more things that I really couldn't find any Black sex workers, so to speak. erotic laborers, prostitutes, whatever you want to call it. I couldn't find them.
Mhm.
And when I did, I couldn't tell if they were erotic laborers or not, because it would be in academia. That's where I usually found them. And so outside of that, I usually found maybe like a few Asian women, and then a lot of queer men. It's a little bit easier in a certain regard for certain, queer men to be out, particularly queer white men, and queer lighter skinned men and whatever. And so I don't know, like I spent a lot of time looking through that stuff, but that's what I associated the term sex work with. And I saw that Carol Lee was cited, so I went looking for her work a little while after that, and I found her book. I'm not gonna pull it out of my stack over here, but Unrepentant Whore is the book that I have. I have Whores and Other Feminists like right underneath it, but the collected works of Scarlett Harlett, and I loved it partially because like it has a pretty cover and like glossy pages, and I'm a bibliophile, but also because it told me, it gave me some extra information about the term that she coined. For instance, like there's a lot of people who have like this kind of like thing about the word prostitute, and I totally understand it, right? But like, I mean, like, come on, like we're like calling ourselves whores and hoes and sluts and bitches and stuff like we do that. So to like have this whole thing around the word prostitute is just that word so strange to me, so strange. And especially considering that like that word has mostly been thrown at specific types of women who look like me, or women who are working class or poor, because they think poor people are dirty regardless of like your race or ethnic background. You're poor, you're dirty, and if the darker you are, the dirtier you are. And so like that was so strange to me, because it was like everybody wanted to be a whore, a slut, all of these like sparkly new reclaimed words, but like they had such a problem with prostitute, and they were like juxtaposing sex work with prostitute. And I was like, I never heard this term before I got online into these spaces and whatever. And then when I read about it, I expected to find that viewpoint, because that's what I kept seeing, like all around, regardless of their background. I kept seeing people say, I prefer sex worker over prostitute because this and that. And come to find out when I read Unrepentant Whores, that it was never meant to be like that. It was a substitute for sex use. And then people kind of took it, and that happens when you coin terminology too. Like people kind of take that and they just kind of run with it. It happened with intersectionality, probably going to happen with pro-hoism. Like it happens all the time. Like it happened with Martin Luther King. He's not a term, but that happened. Yeah. And like they come to symbolize these things according to like whoever like decided what the narrative was, and then like pushed that and had the power to do that. And because like at the time, the movement was dominated by cisgender white women, whether regardless of class, because they were dominating the movement and more visible, and for a lot of different reasons, not just because of like white supremacy and different things like that, but also because like women of color have a totally different history with our sexuality and how it has been viewed, and all of these things, besides, colonization, hypersexuality, with Asian women, there's a lot of fetishization, different, and it's kind of, they have a different flavor of fetishization that's like a little bit, it reminds me of like lighter skinned Black women or biracial Black women. They have like this kind of like fetishization that comes from like all sides, it's very strange. And Black women have like a hyper fetishization and hyper visibility, but it's like there's a lot more like negativity in a certain kind of way. It's like a little bit more dangerous in a certain kind of way, but both of them are dangerous, so whatever. But you guys know what I mean. My point is that I never saw that term, and so I never heard the term sex work is work until I got like on Facebook and got into like some different groups, and I was like, okay, like it's, and for me it was like, I kind of like take, when people give me information, I kind of take things in stride. I'm a natural skeptic, so I throw away whatever doesn't fit for me, and I do what I want to do. And so like I used that term for the term sex work for a while, as an umbrella term, because people were like, that's how you use it. You know, this is what it means. Don't use prostitute. That's what it means. And I was like, but I always called myself a hoe. I always called myself a prostitute. And is that like a bad word? And this was when I was in my early 20s, you know, and you know, I was still kind of new, but not new. And I was younger than a lot of these people in these groups as well. And so, you know, like, you know, and it was Black women, you know, Black feminists telling me, you know, don't use this, use this. And, you know, I was learning. And I kept reading because I'm a reader and that's what I do. And, you know, when I found out, you know, the background around the word, I was like, okay, I can see that the term sex work has like a lot of utility, you know, because it was groundbreaking for the time, and still kind of is, because like, you know, like the way that it gets people to come out of their preconceptions, you know, when it comes to certain terms, you know, because there are a lot of terms that are still thrown around as pejoratives. Now, I have had people call me a sex worker as a pejorative, and that was funny. People, but the thing that I noticed and that changed, that got me, you know, the wheels turning, was that I put sex worker in my bio on Twitter. My account started to get really popular, and I started getting cyber harassed and cyber bullied. Every year I would have like these moments. Most of the time it was from people outside of my circle, but last time was super fun because it was from people inside of my circles, so to speak. Other queer people, other people who kind of had a problem, yeah, either with my talking about biphobia or like my visibility or certain things like that, or the amount of followers, because they kind of felt like, you know, like it's like when you get called on too much in the class and, you know, other people have their hands up, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of how they felt. And I there's nothing I can do about that. But, you know, like I started thinking, you know, and every time I got cyber harassed, except for that last time, people would assume that I was a prostitute and they would like conflate the two. And the reason they do that is because of the history of the word and the way it was used. It was called the prostitutes' rights movement. Okay. It was about prostitutes. And there was a lot of people later on, and still people today that I've had conversation with, because I've said, you know, well, sex worker is an umbrella term. This was a few years ago. And this other sex worker was like, no, it's not. It's not. And she explained what she meant, and went to, and explained, like, you know, like about like, you know, how prostitutes are supposed to be the center of the movement, and, you know, because of, you know, vulnerability and things like that. And they have, and she feels like they have, you know, we have the least visibility in the movement, you know. And I'm going to switch back and forth between they and we, because I don't like to disclose stuff directly. You're not going to catch me slipping. But because I have these kids. But yeah, like I you know, like we had this whole back and forth, and she was like super mad. And then I read in Spread magazine anthology that like there was once like a, you know, prostitutes that got a banner and they stormed the movement. They were like, prostitutes first, you know. And like when what happened is that, you know, what always happens in a society where there's structural, you know, oppression and things like that, and there's a dominant class or classes, what ends up happening is that, like, you know, the word sex worker and the word sex work, people decided, you know, that it was an umbrella term. And then when it became an umbrella term, the people who were already the most visible were, you know, taking up space. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why I decided to scale my use back to sex worker equals prostitute, you know, in my space. You know, everybody else is going to do what they want to do, because people are going to argue me down to like the bone marrow about this. But I know the history of the word, and that's how I feel. And then after that, you know, these, you know, along with that thought process, I started talking about, you know, sex work is work, which I also never heard until like I got on social media. I didn't have internet until like my early 20s. I lived by myself, but I didn't have internet. I like a lot of people, like, that's why I was so late to camming, and I was so late to, like, I've never screened clients, and people were like, what? And I was like, I don't know. I mostly pulled clients out of the strip club or off the street. I don't know. So, because I didn't have internet. And so sex work is work became this thing that I kept hearing, and I was like, okay. And then I was, you know, I started interrogating it, and people got mad again because, you know, like they were like, well, you know, we're trying to say this and this and that. And I was like, I know what you're trying to say. I'm not stupid, but, you know, sorry. I that's what I said back then though. My bad, y'all. So, you know, but I was like, you know, I know what you're trying to say. I don't need you to like super explain to me, because I can read what you're saying, but what I'm saying is that I don't like to work. And like, and people call me lazy and they call me all of these things. And I would ask about gigs and people would be like, why isn't your kid in school? And I would be like, because he doesn't like school. He's disabled. He doesn't want to go to school. He doesn't want to tie his shoes. So he has Velcro shoes because I don't want to make him tie his shoes because he doesn't have to. Like, shoes slip on now. Like, and so like, you know, like I was like, I don't want to work. And they were like, you lazy whore. And I was like, wow, like I'm a little lazy, but geez, you know, like, you know, and and I had, I was dealing with uncontrolled ADHD at the time. So like I quit school like 3 or 4 times and all this other stuff. So I wasn't, when I got into sex work, stripping, erotic labor, all of that stuff, when I got into that stuff, I was looking for a way to not work or to not have to work like every day. I've never worked, 9 to 5. I don't want to because it's too much. I cannot show up on time. I will get fired. I can't keep up with my schedule. I don't check my email regularly. And I just, and even on medication, it's just really, really hard. I have all these kids. Well, 2 kids, but it seems like a lot. It's like a lot, you guys. My kid, he's bouncing up and down. He's up in the middle of the night all day. So sex work is work. It's just not, it wasn't like the phrase, I got it, but it wasn't appealing to me because it was like, it made me feel like now I have to I really need to be putting in this time. And with camming, it's really like that. And I think a lot of people they were like, well, you work from home. And I was like, okay. And I work 30 hours a week on camera and I had to buy equipment to do this. And I'm still not making any freaking money. I'm working for hours and hours. And then they're like, oh, you must have sour pussy or something, like you, like something's wrong with you because you're not making money. It couldn't possibly be because I'm Black or because the market is oversaturated or because I'm on the wrong side. It couldn't possibly be all of these different things, beauty, politics, desirability. It could it's just because I have a dank pussy or something, and that's what it was. And that's what I kept hearing. And no matter what I did, that was the consensus that, if she has to crowdfund, then definitely she's a bad hoe. And camming, people think that this doesn't take any work, camming takes a lot of work. And if I could, I would go back to in-person work, pandemic aside, I would go back. But I'm a mom now, I have these kids and I'm estranged from my family because my mom's abusive. So if something happens to me, I don't know what would happen to my son. I'm the only one on his birth certificate. That's a piece of shit. So, I don't know what would happen. I don't want my mom to have custody of him. So, I have to kind of toe a certain line. I have to maybe, okay, Cupid. I don't like seeking arrangements. I have to plan dates a certain way, and I need childcare, and I need all of these extra things. So when I take breaks from erotic labor, people are like, she doesn't work, or they say things like one Dysplakian babe, whatever. In 2019 said she's not even a full-time, full-service sex worker. And I was like, what the hell is that? What is a full-time for? Nobody knows what that is. That's not a real thing, So I'm sorry. I'm a talker. I'm a talker. That's my answer.
Well, that's why we invited you.
Yeah, work sucks, you guys.
Yeah. So Kitty, do you want to go next?
Sure. That was really great. And I definitely agree about work sucking and not working. And the idea, I kind of, with sex work is work, I think that it's an argument, and in sex work, both are arguments. Essentially, sex work, you're saying that these kind of jobs have this thing in common, and therefore, for at least some purposes, we're grouping them together. And sex work is saying, it can be saying different things. It can be saying, this is actually hard work. I'm not because it is sometimes, depending on, maybe for some people it's not. For me, it is. I wished it wasn't, but it is for me. And it can be, if you're trying to unionize your strip club, I could see how something like sex work and sex work as work are both really helpful when we're talking about, Femi was saying really well, when you make something that is supposed to be complex, and when you narrow it down like that and flatten it, you end up not focusing on the most marginalized people, which here are full service sex workers. So I think that there is a use for it, but I think that use is pretty discreet. And I think we use it a lot more when we don't really think about what we're using it for and why we're using it. And same with the term sex work, which I use because I like the vagueness, even though, well, I'm just not gonna, I like the part of it is I like because it does encompass legal things in it. So I can, but also in a lot of ways that once again, you know, it does a lot of times sex work, the people that take up the most space are the people that should not be in this umbrella. So, but kind of in terms of work in general, I agree that we shouldn't, that's my problem with communism generally and socialism generally, is seeing people as workers first before people. And so I think that generally everywhere, you know, like we should all, whether we're workers or not. And I understand that workers is a political class, not necessarily a person who goes to work, but even still, it's still alienating for disabled people. And it's still, you're still internalizing the ableism and white supremacy's value of productivity that we have, even on the left, so much. And that we're like, really, that we still, embody, a lot of us, the left still, that we still put, you know, this rise and grind mentality and all this kind of bullshit that we see even in sex work and even in places. And so I think conversations like this are really helpful to talk about and think about, like, yeah, in what ways do we want this to not be like work, and what ways, what can we do about it, and to think about possibilities. Like, so does it mean maybe that we use this slogan for this reason, and just being really intentional about it. And so, yeah, so I guess I would like to those questions kind of around sex work phrasing and sex workers work, both generally, I think that they're both often misused and both used when we should have more nuanced conversations, but I think that sometimes they can be helpful in certain organizing campaigns that are well thought out and they're used appropriately and thoughtfully.
That absolutely makes sense. And I think your point too about the way that sex work can be useful as a euphemism that encompasses legalized work or semi-legalized work as well is a very, very good point that I hadn't thought of before. Yeah. So, okay, Madeline,
Unmute. Hi. Great points, everybody. This year marks, I've been a full-time sex worker for 20 years.
Wow.
What if that's a clap or not? I don't know.
We can clap for that. I love
What's that?
I love that you clapped for yourself.
Yes, that's one thing. As a sex worker, nobody's ever going to, pat you on the back. You're not going to have a boss or anyone ever pat yourself on the back. So everybody, let's do this. Pat yourself on the back. You're doing a good job. I also, like Femi, grew up in the Midwest, working class. My entire, when I was a child, it was all about the first thing you need to do when you turn 13 years old is go get a part-time job.
Yeah.
And you need to work until you die. So when I was 13 years old, I went out and got a job, but I couldn't get a job because I was 13, but I actually managed to get something under the table, And then, my family was all about, I grew up on the east side of Detroit. So as soon as you left high school, it's like the best thing that you could do is let's go get it on a job on the assembly line. You know what I mean? Go work at one of the big three, all these things. That's what my family did. That's what everybody did. You got that job. You were like, wow, I'm set for life. In the back of my head, I'm thinking, this seems I was the black sheep of everyone. Everyone was like, I'm like, how? You want to be there 9 to 5 for 40 years? Yeah. What? That just seems odd to me, but I had no idea why I felt that. You know what I mean? I didn't understand it. And everybody around me was telling me, that you're lazy. That's crazy. In order to be anything, you have to, get that 9 to 5, go put those 40 hours in, don't worry about the rest about your life. Work, 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 work,
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I'm going to stumble around this sort of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And and I was going to be a dental hygienist, actually. That's what I was studying. But I didn't have money to pay for school. So I answered this ad in the back of a, newspaper rag. It was like, make $1,000, be naked. And I was like, $1,000?
Yeah.
I'm be rich. Like, this is awesome, And I walk into my first sex work job. This was 2001. The internet was nothing. And it was a webcam job that you go into this like industrial park, and we would work out of this space. And I worked through the night. My shift was midnight till 3 a.m, And so from there until now, I have identified with the sex work as work because, yeah, I think that my labor and what I'm doing is work. And I do use it as a broad term. But my ideas about it have shifted and changed so much over the years, and it's still shifting and changing right now as I'm learning more about sex work and what it is and how it's changing. And I'm very much into and looking forward to getting into the discussion with like sex work as anti-work. I think that's really important to talk about. But my last thing that I wanted to say, so at the CAM studio, what ended up happening, and I thought like telling a story would help people relate. I started working there, and there was, like 3 different shifts, and there was people coming in at all hours. And we had rooms that we cammed in, but you would cam in somebody else's room after, and it was your job to clean up their mess after. They didn't have people to like do that or anything. So all of us got together. I mean, we weren't a union or anything, but we were just like, and they wanted us to bring in the supplies, the cleaning supplies. And I'm like, you're making a large sum of money off of us. You can, some Lysol or something, you know what I mean? Anything. And it took, and they wouldn't do it and they wouldn't do it. And then there was a big outbreak of genital warts, everybody, including me. And I said, this is why we need this in here, like we need these. And so finally, like a week later, we come and there's, this whole like protocol set up and everything, but it took blood, sweat, and tears for them to agree to give us just some Lysol to clean the whatever, so that we weren't spreading, STIs or anything like that. And to me, that just seems like you're saying, like, if we're workers, we are of value, right? And therefore we deserve rights in the workplace. So yes, we should have the Lysol, but if we're sex workers, is that work not valuable anymore? And so then therefore we don't get the Lysol? Or are we just human, like we all said? And you know what? We deserve the fucking Lysol in my workspace.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so simple.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
yes, I mean, I look at sex work as work, but I think the problem is that other people don't look at sex work as work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we just get dehumanized, and that's the problem. Like, give me the Lysol.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Does that help at all?
Yeah. I am so thrilled with this conversation. You guys are all so brilliant, and so much of what everyone is saying just completely resonates with me. I mean, in terms of my own experiences. And something that I was just thinking about too is how Femi brought up the idea of the lazy whore, and how that is like, I think that disability stigma and sex work stigma are deeply intertwined. And that this idea of being lazy as a pejorative when, as disabled people, and also even as abled people, I think abled people too, often want to work as little as possible. Like this point, Madeline, that you were coming back to, and I think this is something that Jaylani was also going to bring up, is how for so many of us, sex work is a strategy so that we don't have to work. Yeah, it's a survival strategy, right? And I wanted to bring up something else that Jaylani was going to talk about, which I just didn't get mentioned yet, but I think a lot of people feel this, which is just like the alternative to what Femi was talking about, which is the idea that prostitute is the language of criminalization. And for her, I know that that was one of her feelings, was just being labeled as a prostitute by the police and literally having that prevent you from getting other jobs, in fact. So a couple of you guys have already sort of brought this up, but anti-sex work feminists often argue that sex work is not work because, to paraphrase, sex work is gender-based violence. That's what they will say. But my question for you guys is, are work and violence mutually exclusive? Does work imply consent? If the choice we have is between working and not surviving, is that even a meaningful choice? And Femi, I'm going to call on you first. Let me know if you want me to say the question again.
Sorry, I was like in the chat because somebody said some shit and it like triggered some like stripper hate. Oh. And I had to like calm down and be nice and say some stuff because like, how dare you? But not really though, not like super mad. It's just like, it made me think of like when I was a stripper and people would say things like that and I'll be like, what do you even mean? What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
What does that mean? So sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I can see that there's like so much going on in the chat, and honestly, I can't even look at it because it's too much to everyone. It's like too much for me.
I have too much going on
here. Just with
I wish we could get a transcript of the freaking chat.
Oh yeah, I think we can actually at the end. We'll figure that out.
Because I want it.
So my question. So to say my question again, anti-sex work feminists, as you know, often argue that sex work isn't work because they say sex work is violence. So my question is, are work and violence mutually exclusive? Does work imply consent actually? And if work does imply consent or even choice, I mean, if the choice we have is between surviving or doing work, is that even a meaningful choice?
Okay, so I'm going to begin this with talking about my therapist.
Okay.
Who told me that I don't know how to relax. Now, everybody else told me I was lazy. So this was very interesting to me. But people in my personal life always tell me that I don't know how to relax. And what is happening in this chat? There's a whole essay right here.
Yeah, I know. I think we might have to have you, we'll save it for you.
But
and then
like,
and answer everyone's questions for you.
But yeah, so like I was talking to my therapist and she was like, you don't know how to relax. And I was like, I do know how to relax. Okay, my circumstances do not allow me to relax much at this time, but I know how to relax. Unfortunately, I guess like everybody's definition of relaxation does not match. Okay, when I relax, I like to knit. And if I don't knit, I like to read. I like to read academic papers. I like to read essays. I like to read anthologies. I like to read nonfiction. I like to read fantasy. I like to do puzzles. I'm an old lady at heart. I like to do logic puzzles. I like to do fill-it-ins. I like to do Sudoku. Like I like to do mazes. When I was a kid, I like to do hidden pictures. Like I've always been like this. You know, if I'm really like trying to relax, I do what I did last night and I start covering my books. Yeah. Librarian style, because I ordered a bunch of stuff from Dimco and I was like, I gotta do this stuff. So I covered all my books and I listened to them crinkle and stuff, and I like to smell the paper. I'm just like, I'm a bibliophile, so I'm like a weirdo with books, but like, you know, so I like smell the paper. It's probably like formaldehyde on it or something, but like, you know, like that's the kind of stuff that helps me relax. Now notice that when I relax, I'm constantly laboring because that's what I like to do. But at the same time, if we're talking about work outside of, you know, what I personally do and think with this stuff and whatever, work under, you know, the type of, you know, government we have, work where if you don't work, you don't have health insurance or you have Medicaid like me, or your health insurance costs like a grip, you know, like these ideas of like what work is as defined by a capitalist government, descended, most of whom are descended from people who started a war over capitalism.
Yeah.
Not slaves, but capitalism. They started a war not to end slavery, but to stop the South and get rid of these damn inefficient plantations and industrialize that shit. That's what they wanted. They wanted money, and they were Democrats. They were called Republicans back then, but they wanted money. That's why they started that war. And that's that on that. So we live in a capitalist country. And I think a lot of people forget. And this is, you know, this is kind of like a historical thing of how they kind of sow discord and everything like that. And they did that deliberately. They did it deliberately to the white working class and white poor people. They were like, you know what, just like they do with people now and like immigrants and the new immigrants, they were like, you know who's stopping you guys from getting these jobs? You know who's stopping you from having good things? Former slaves. That's who. And some people were like, no, that doesn't sound right. And then some people were like, yeah, that's who it is. And so like, because of that, they stoked that hatred and everything. And what they did was they redirected hatred toward Black people and immigrants and all of these things. You know, they were like, man, these Irish people stealing our jobs. You know, like they were just like really mad at everybody. Like they were like, we don't need to give Black people and Irish people the vote. Like, what do we need to do that for? Like Lucky Charms my ass. That's what they did. Like, and then they were like, oh, don't be fussy. Don't fuss. What are you fussing for? You're right here. I didn't go anywhere. We're right here. Look. Are you hot? Are you hot? Some milk for you? Okay, so like all that stuff was going on and they like, I'm sorry if you guys see my boob. I'm trying not to.
Don't worry.
Okay, there we go.
I don't think we can see it.
Let me move my camera up a little bit. There we go. So, so basically all this stuff is going on. They redirected hate from the capitalists and the, you know, the elites and everything like that. And they like just moved it on over to people who, you know, were more vulnerable. And they do that still to this day. It's like, you know, like it's really silly because like we could be, you know, like what they wanted to do was exactly, you know, what they accomplished though with, you know, killing unions and everything. They just step by step decided that they were not going to deal with class struggle. Like they just weren't going to do that. And I think like a lot of people forget about class. And I noticed this in Black feminist circles, you know, because that's where I hang out. And like they like people deliberately don't mention class because they want to be like, you know, I'm a businessman, not a businessman. You know what I'm saying? Like they want to be like Jay-Z. So they, you know, they're like, you know, class is not even, you know, we're still Black, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, you know, like the bourgeoisie, middle class Blacks, they really felt like they were leading us poor Black people by the nose because, you know, they had some paternalistic things going on where they need us to lead them. That's how they talked about poor Black people, middle class Black people in the 1800s and 1900s. They talked about us like we were children and that we needed them. And we were just like little bumpkins who needed their help. And that, so like class struggle is like really important when it comes to this conversation. So when you talk about work in this system, then yes, it's definitely exploitative or coercive for most people.
Yeah.
I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but I'm sure that you do because you work. But you're working more hours now than you used to.
Yeah.
For less money. They're taking your time. You have cell phones now, so you get emails all the time. No one ever stops emailing you. I'm a gig worker and that's my life. So I know that if you're working 9 to 5, it's like bad because you're not actually working 9 to 5. You're working all the time. And they're telling you that work is good because work gets you money, but they're giving you less money for the work that you're doing. you're working more hours. The poorer you are, the more hours you're working for less. The darker you are, the more hours you're working for much less.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of the degrees that, you know, Black women are getting and all of this other stuff, like they're not making that much money. And Black men are making maybe a cent above them. As much as people want to pretend that, you know, poor Black men specifically have so much male privilege that they're just doing so much better, when in reality, a quick Google will tell you that that is not the case. In fact, their income is actually precipitously like dropped. Or, you know, the only reason that poor and working class Black men are benefiting from their, you know, male privilege is because the type of jobs that they take are masculinized. Yeah. And working class and poor white men work those jobs too. So they're not going to get paid that much less, but they're still going to get paid less because they're working class. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, like, I think that, you know, there's a lot that gets erased in these conversations when we talk about work, because people think of work and then they kind of like, you know, I don't know what it is, but like people sometimes have a hard time holding like more than one thing in their head at a time. So they hear, you know, like, well, you know, like I take issue with sex workers' work. And then they start saying, well, we know, but it's used because of this and, you know, yada, 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 and whatever, like they're the only ones that read Marx, or, you know, I didn't like Marx, but, you know, like Paula Fargu.
Oh, God.
You know,
I know.
I have the Paula Fargu, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't really read Marx.
Oh my God, you know how to pronounce his name. I don't even know.
What?
Oh, then, yeah, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. I've been pronouncing it in my head
I'm really bad at French, like specifically. I don't know what it is, but like I can do Italian, I can do Spanish because I grew up speaking Spanish, but I'm really bad at French. I don't know, like I'm just terrible. My Haitian friend used to make fun of me all the time. But my point is that like you're not gonna make me read Marx.
Yeah.
Like there are people, they're like line, especially like Black academics. I don't know what it is, but they go to the academy and they're like, well, you don't understand socialism if you haven't read Marx. And I'm like, I can add 2 + 2. Like they like, you know, like I can do arithmetic.
Oh man.
Okay. I might not be able to do squiggly I pre-calculus math, but I can do arithmetic. Okay. And I know what socialism is without reading Marx. Okay. Everybody is not, if I want to write a play or I want to write something super funny, you know, I'm not going to go all the way back and read the old English version of the Canterbury Tales.
Yeah.
I'm going to read like the new version because it's still funny. The Canterbury Tales is really funny. It's like, it's an old dusty text, but if you get it in like, you know, if you get like a translation, it's super funny. The Middle English one is funny too. But anyway, I was an English nerd. And my point is that like people, you say work, you say you don't like this phrase, sex work is work. Everybody comes up in arms like, well, I love it because of this, you know, like Jehovah's Witnesses in this chat. Like we love that you love it and we understand it. You know, I know that like whores are supposed to be stupid, but we totally like, sorry. I keep slipping up, but like I know that whores are supposed to be like, you know, lessers. You know, we're less intelligent, we're lazy, you know, all of these things. But we read, whores read. I understand what sex workers work means. I understand what the utility of the word sex work does. I understand what it does politically. For me, sex worker, and I said this in the chat, it equals politicized whore, as in prostitute, specifically. And then I use erotic labor as an umbrella term. And you're not going to make me do anything different. I have very strong opinions. I just, you know, don't beat my ass about it. I know. My point is that work, when you say work is bad and you don't, you know, we say we take issue with it. We're not just trying to doo-doo all over everybody's hard work and everything like that. You know, this is a new generation. And sometimes when you have kids, they think differently than you. And it's okay. It's okay. Your kids are their own people, but we appreciate you and we love you. But we're going to do our own thing because we're the kids. My kids do their own thing. Every day, my son tells me what he's not going to do for me. Like he does so much for me. Yeah. And I just let him go a lot of the time because like, he's like me. Yeah. He doesn't like authority. He doesn't want to do what I tell him to do. And he's not going to do what I said without me explaining why 5 times. Maybe more than that. So, you know, like just, you know, just, you know, rub your feathers gently. It's okay. It's okay. Work also is not always a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like a lot of people forget that. They think about, you know, work and they think, okay, so anti-work, we don't like work, work is bad. These are things that we say because they are, you know, like, you know, well, for me, I say it because, you know, I'm dramatic, you know, I love drama. And these are dramatic things. It's like a headline. It's like when you see a headline and they put a picture that you know doesn't go with the article, like they did with my Afropunk article. They put like a picture of two gay men, like it had nothing to do with the article. I didn't choose it. You know, it's just inflammatory for no reason, except for we have our reasons. You know, we say that we take issue because we take issue.
Yeah.
And you know, like with work, but work also isn't inherently bad. Work under the conditions that we are living right now is bad. You know, working for more and, you know, getting less, having to, like, why is dental separate from like the rest of our insurance? That doesn't make, are your teeth not in your body? That doesn't make any sense. If I go to the ER and I have a tooth problem, which I have chronic dental problems, they tell me I can't do anything for you. Here's some Tylenol with codeine or whatever drug and some antibiotics. Go to the dentist. For what? You can have a dentist office right here. A dentist can come to me in the ER. Like, this is madness. And yet I will have to go somewhere else entirely. It doesn't make any sense. And that's what the problem with work in America and a lot of places is. You know, a lot of places, because we're getting globalization, you know, are becoming Americanized. And they're like, oh, we can fuck our citizens like this. Let's do it, you know. And in countries that have more money and are more homogenous and more white, they are socializing medicine and they're socializing all of these things and whatever. And, you know, because and schools are getting better. Like, I don't know if you guys read about like news in Finland and stuff, but Finland's schools used to be terrible. And now they're awesome because they can do that. They have a very small immigrant population. So it doesn't feel like a threat for them to do things for their citizens. It doesn't feel like a threat for them to give paternity and maternity leave in countries that are mostly one type of, you know, ethnicity or race or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But here in America, because of the history that this country has, you know, just constantly stealing stuff like a bad little brother, you know, we, you know, like they don't want to share, no share, you know, like they just want to take everything. They find oil, so they found oil somewhere else on this globe and they were just like, we're over there, we're taking it, mine, you know, like children. And the thing is that, like, you know, at the same time, I like to work. I just don't like to work the way people want me to work. But I, you know, like I said at the beginning, when I relax, I like to do stuff. I, you know, I have ADHD. I like to think about stuff. I like to tweet. I like to work. I like to write. I like to journal. I like to read. And I'm not just going to sit, like my therapist wanted me to sit around and like with my thoughts. And I was like, what does that even mean? Like, am I just going to sit in silence and just stare? I've got kids. I don't have time to do that. You know, well, what about when you're in the bathroom and you're, you know, this and that, or take a bath? I don't want to sit down and take a bath. Like, I don't want to do that. It's boring. Like, and like it's super boring. I don't like, you know, and I don't mind boredom, but when I'm bored, I find stuff to do or I go to sleep. Yeah. Because that's how I am, you know, but it's, you know, it's relaxing to do stuff. So I don't want us to mistake work is bad or work sucks with just like everything, like we don't want to do anything. And I think that's what people hear when they hear us say we're anti-work. They're like, you don't want to work, you don't want to do anything, you're lazy. When in fact, like I said in this chat, cats are lazy and they're super awesome. Okay, like they sit on a cable box all damn day, people brush them and all of this, and you think that this cat is not doing anything, but do you have ants? Do you have mice? No, you do not. Okay, the cat knows what it's doing and it does it very well without you just imposing on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think these are all really good points. And I want to make sure that I'm going to not talk so that you guys all have more time to talk. So Kitty, will you please share with us your thoughts?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about laziness, actually, that primarily come from fat liberation. And so without like getting into the whole thing here, and but I recommend, like, I think fatness and laziness, and also like being a fat sex worker and that like part of laziness too. Like, so whenever lazy, like I always think of that because there's, for obvious reasons and all the stigma, but I just kind of wanted to throw that out there without diving too deep into that. But the connection between like laziness and fatness and fatness and sex work, and I mean, I could talk forever, and there needs to be a lot more discussion about that. But so in terms of like disability, and I think I like what Femi was saying about like work, that part about work being good, because at times, like certain kinds and meaningful work, because for disabled people a lot, like we don't get to work. Like I'm a lawyer. I was a lawyer. I got pushed. I was too sick to work as a lawyer, and too crazy to work as a lawyer. And so I got pushed out of the profession. It didn't last very long, and that's how I ended up in sex work. I also have ADHD, if you can't tell. And so I think that, and then I'm not saying that I don't like to, a lot of times I don't say that because it gives, like, people react weird, and I feel like they make that, like, makes me more legitimate in some way or not. But just that I wish I could be using my edges, like some of my education, to do some work that I can't do because of avenues that are closed to me because of ableism. Like there's work I want to be doing, there's jobs that I want to get that will be, of course, be exploitative. It's capitalism. There's jobs that I'd love to be able to do, but because of ableism, like I can't get them, or I can't do them. They won't make the accommodations, or because the ableism, like all the parts of it, including being crazy and the way that affects jobs and all this stuff, and even sex work. So even part of talking about laziness in sex work and madness and going back to class, like we're talking about. So I also come from like a very working class background and live in a working class area. And most of my clients are working class, like and very rooted in that kind of area. And the way that class plays into like laziness and almost work and anti-work too, because anti-work to me, because I don't know if it comes from my being working class, and just like you can't let up for a second, you always have to be pushing, you can't, like any second the bottom can fall out, just kind of always being precarious and feeling precarious. Where like, so a lot of these kinds of other kinds of work would be more, would feel more of a privilege, would feel maybe even less like work. I mean, some of these fancy office jobs are less like work than even some of the best clients that make things really easy for you. And you get a lot of power, you get, and people don't talk to you like you're a piece of shit as much, even though they still will. But there's just, it's different. So it's complicated, I think, with work and not work and all these different things. And I think too, that we, like, along with this, in terms of all our opportunities and our, like, not everyone's going to in the same position. And I think even when you're just talking about like whores, like people that just like, not even the more umbrella term, but even when you're talking about just like prostitutes, it's a whole different if you're charging $1,400 an hour and you're sitting at a 2-hour long 5-star restaurant for 2 hours for part, you know what I mean? That's a lot different than if you're like spending an hour where the guy's going to make sure he gets every dollar's worth, every minute, seconds worth. Yes. Of that hour, which is different than if you're doing something else, which is different if you're doing something else. So I think that that's something with all this too, that and I don't want to say, I think it's like, I don't think it's necessarily privileged people that are saying that and making the anti-work arguments. I'm saying that I think that when we think about work and the material conditions of work, we need to, and not working, we need to think about the material conditions, which are heavily influenced by class and disability and race and gender and everything.
Yes. Oh my God. I mean, yeah, I think everything you're saying is so important. So Madeline, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'll keep it short because I like the next question. But I was like going through my notes, and I'll say my little last bit about this, and okay, bounce off of everyone, because I don't think we really actually addressed this part of the question. So I feel like I can still consent to my gig that day, and not necessarily love the gig that day.
Yes.
And that's totally okay, right? Doesn't that seem reasonable to everybody out there in the world? You're going to work, this kind of sucks, but I consent to it. I'm doing that. The fact that I feel the need to consent to it, let's ask us, like, you know, that's the question. Why do I have to continue to put myself through that? Well, I mean, that's because of the way that this, you know, the society works.
Yeah.
And, you know, when talking about like rape and gender-based violence, like in workplaces situations and sex, you know, within sex work, I think obviously that type of violence, you're going to find it, and we are talking about this. I see people talking about this all on the internet, and you know, I always feel like I'm coming into battle when I have to have these conversations about sex work. When I was getting ready for this panel, I was like, I usually put my lashes on and my strap on, and I'm like, I'm going to come in here because I'm going to war. I have to teach and tell these people these things and fight and fight and fight. And you know, I'm going to show up in my pajamas and chill because I'm tired. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But what I'm trying to say is, like, you know, the violence like this is everywhere, right? And so the question that I think that we have to ask is, why is that violence there, and where does it come from, and why does it exist, and does everybody know what the answer to that question is?
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. And that is sort of where I was going when I wrote this question, is just thinking about how work and violence are often happening at the same time. I personally have felt like, you know, so part of my experience is of being trafficked, but which, by the way, I've always been very uncomfortable with that term. But I only really learned that some situations that I've been in really like met that definition after I went to law school and learned how the law defines it. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, that was just actually what I thought was a shitty working situation. Like,
yeah.
that's,
I know, it's crazy while these things unfold and you learn more.
Yeah, exactly. And how, so I think about how, for me, I feel like, okay, I was trafficked into sex work. Like, that you can be experiencing violence while working, and those things don't happen separately necessarily, you know? Yeah. And also, I think your point about consenting to something that you don't necessarily want to do, like that consent is really different when we're talking about work than when we're talking about private sexual experiences. And I think this is part of the problem, is that people have tried to apply the definition of consent from private sexual experiences, where it's like the ideal version is like enthusiastic desire, to work, sex work only, not other forms of work.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So I don't know if I cut you off though.
No, you didn't cut me off. I was keeping it short. And I love what you said, though. I mean, I agree 100%, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to ask the next question because you like it, but I also think this is definitely going to be our last question. So I'm going to just say both of the questions, and you guys should feel free to answer however you want. So the third question was, regardless of whether work implies consent, work is, and I think you guys have already talked about this, work is really central to public understandings of social membership in the United States. So much so, and this is something Femi was talking about, that the legitimacy of a person's claim to a job is often used as a proxy for a legitimate claim to residency. So like when people say immigrants are stealing American jobs, the idea is that, you know, by living here, you deserve to work. Work is, you know, part of living here. Work is part of being a member of the community. And so, sorry, I lost my place. So my question was, where does this idea leave those of us who are disabled, who aren't or can't be part of what's traditionally understood as the workforce? Like, do we have to be workers in order to be part of the American social body? And so Femi, I'm gonna call on you next. Do you want
All
me
right.
to call on someone else first, or?
No, I was like having trouble with my mute button, and I was like, what the fuck? I'm
Okay.
trying to, are we on question 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say questions 3 and 4 because this is the end. We only have a few minutes left.
Okay,
actually.
I'm gonna try to keep it short then.
Okay. So,
All
and
right.
question 4 was both disabled people and sex workers are often stigmatized as unable to speak for ourselves or to understand what's best for us. And I was wondering if we could envision a call for liberation and recognition that doesn't rely on thinking of ourselves primarily as workers and that being the way that we deserve agency. But you should feel free to answer. I think those questions are linked.
Okay, sorry, I'm looking at this and talk. Okay, so we're looking at sex workers, gender-based violence, and that argument,
No,
or the last one, 4, just
no,
4.
3.
That's what it says for 3. Okay.
Oh, regardless of whether work implies consent, work is central to public understandings of social membership. You got it?
Yeah, no, I don't see it, but I'm gonna just try to get there
Okay.
because it doesn't say the same thing. But
I'm sorry.
But basically, okay, so we were talking about relating to the labor and how like we were talking about this in the chat a little bit. So like I'm gonna try to piece that together. But we were talking about labor, and Carol Lee was talking about how that was one of the main ends. I know like Heather Berg writes a lot about labor. I write a lot about labor as far as like anti-work and decrem. And I just want to like say, I guess, in relation to the labor argument and do we have to relate to it as workers? I think that sometimes people maybe forget, or I don't know, some don't care, but I think sometimes it's just really forgetting because we all kind of center ourselves in our own narratives. And I think it's important to talk about labor and to connect with other laborers under this regime.
Yeah.
That being said, all of us do not want this regime to continue.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be considered. I saw, just in the chat just a minute ago, I don't remember the person's name, but they had said, I don't like the word eradicate, and I don't like these words because they're like patriarchal and they're violent and they're this and they're that. And one thing that I've been writing about recently a lot is the bioessentialism and gender essentialism that happens in a lot of these feminist arguments. Now, I personally believe that that's like a stain or a residual from like way in the past, when white middle class feminists who didn't care about working class women, even if they were white, like they were like having these similar arguments about terminology and tone and work and all of these things, but they didn't really like care about work like that because like they weren't working like that. Like working class women were working. So these are the questions that we've been asking, both immigrant women who, some of whom became white, and, Black women over time, like over 50% of Black women were working in comparison to like a lot of other groups. And then like a lot of immigrant women were not counted as white back then. So like they were working in factories and dying and stuff. And so it is important to remember that we are fighting a labor fight. The thing that ends up happening in this movement a lot of the time, and that stops us and impedes us, is that the movement doesn't have a lot of money. Like we don't have a lot of financial support. And Ronald Weitzer, I don't really know all of his work, but he did write a paper about this and about like the kind of the failures of the movement, similar to some of the failures of the feminist movement. And part of the reason that the feminist movement in a certain kind of way did fail is because of, it being represented by middle class women. First white middle class women, and then white middle class women and other middle class women. Like, I put my work on Twitter all the time, and I used to use like cite Black women and whatever until I realized that they were never going to highlight my work because they were academics and middle class, a lot of them, and it's a different social class. They don't care about whores. They don't want to be seen as whores, especially as Black women. So there's like a lot of layers for a lot of us. But I wanted to say something about like the language and like the whole like, patriarchy, because like the thing is that like sometimes these conversations lead to a lot of gender essentialism. Like these words, like men are not inherently violent. I know that that's like a narrative that's kind of happening on Twitter right now and on social media, that, like like fuck these cishet men and fuck this and all of this and that and whatever. And most of it is focused on men of color. And most of it is focused on like men who are more visible. Like it's not like they don't talk about poverty. They don't talk about class. They don't talk about poor men at all.
Mm-hmm.
But when you bring it up for, when you talk about child support, when you talk about all these things, they're like patriarchy, sexism. And that's exactly what happened in the 1800s and the 1900s. That's exactly what they did. They decided that sexism was the most important thing. They said, fuck these immigrant women, fuck those Black women. Are they even women? Like they didn't even count Black women as women.
Yeah.
Why should these people, why should immigrants, why should Irish people, why should Jewish people, why should Black people get the vote before us? We are white middle-class women. That's what they said. They said patriarchy, oh my God, it's the worst thing ever. That's what Susan B. Anthony said. And they aligned with racists to make their point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
I know.
So we want to be real careful. Real careful to not do that.
Yeah.
Like particularly when, I guess particularly when you're in a mixed space, you're a mixed company. I'm Black. Okay. There's a lot of different stuff intersecting in here. Some of us are disabled. We're neurodivergent. You got to stop that. There's more than patriarchy. There's more than sexism. There's more than that. There's sexism. There's racism. There's ableism. There's all of these things, and all of these things are happening at the same time. You don't have to do the math. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to math it up.
Yeah.
Do it. because the thing is that, when we're talking about labor, we're talking about all these intersections. Children used to be laborers. They removed children from the labor force, not just because they were concerned and they cared about kids, but because kids cared about kids, and other people who did care about kids were like, let's just make these laws. And because they're paternalistic, they removed children from the workforce first, and then they removed teenagers from the workforce again, like after that. They raised the ages for a lot of things, and now everybody's arguing over like if a 17 or 16-year-old is a kid or not. At 16 or 17, 18, you're sexually mature. You are a minor young adult. They took the jobs away from them. Some of them were poor kids. Some of them needed to support their families, and now they have to work for pennies. Yeah. And they use child labor laws to marginalize that group. They use them to marginalize youth out of concern. They're not concerned about children. If they were concerned about children, they would be doing things for children. If they didn't want children in sex work, they would be giving money to children, and they wouldn't have children in poverty. So when we talk about labor and we talk about sex work, all of those things matter. Yeah. When we talk about labor, we're talking about children, we're talking about youth, we're talking about child labor, we're talking about Black people. We're not just talking about patriarchy and sexism. We're talking about intersections, all of these systems that go together, okay? All of them. I take 3 medications a day. One of them I've been taking since I was 16 years old. I needed to live. Yeah. Every day I take that. Since I was 16, I have an autoimmune disease. Yeah. I take ADHD medication in the morning, and I take antidepressants at night because my life is hard. And that stuff helps me think and gets me through the day. But it took a lot for me to get this medication because I'm Black, and something about Illinois, this is not happening to me in Wisconsin. I have really good doctors, regardless of race in Wisconsin. For some reason, Illinois is a really raggedy state, and they're really racist here. And they think, and they're also really classist too. Like I can't pick and choose. I think, oh, it's a Black doctor, I'm gonna be okay. No, that's not what happens here. It's just terrible all around. They think that we're all drug seekers. Poor people are drug seekers. If you have Medicaid, you're a drug seeker. Like it's just like a bunch of stuff. There's not a lot of resources. Yeah. But my point, without rambling too much, is that when we're talking about labor, we have to identify these problems in the movement, because the thing is, the movement is not just about labor. For a lot of us, we have other stuff going on. So yes, labor is very important. It was a very important issue back then, and it's a very important issue now. But all of us don't want this system to continue and for things to just be okay. And that's what I was talking about on Twitter when I was talking about decriminalization. And I made a lot of white people mad because they were like, you're erasing all of this work that we did. And there's Black and brown women who feel the same way we do. Okay, well, some of these motherfuckers are invested in the class system. Okay, some Black people want to be rich. Okay, is this news? Like, this is not news. Some people don't care. Some Black people don't care about poor people, even if they're poor. it's madness. Okay, people work against their own interests all the time. Okay, people who are affected by racism perpetuate racism. People who are affected by biphobia perpetuate biphobia. It's madness. Okay, you know, people are not logical all the time.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about, I guess when we talk about labor, it is important, but y'all gotta remember too that labor is not the only fight that we're fighting.
Yeah.
And that decriminalization is harm reduction. Now, I know people are adding all these little adjectives in front of decrim, and they're saying full decrim and this and that and whatever. Listen here, there's no such thing as partial decriminalization. That's not a real thing. That's a thing that they made up. It's made up, it's make believe, like a monster under your bed. It's not real. What they did was they perverted the meaning of decriminalization, which meant to eradicate and get rid of all of these laws that affect whores and sex workers and erotic laborers and all of that. Decrim was literally coined with whores in mind, and they cannot take that away from us. There's no such thing as full decrim, because decrim is full decrim. They made it wrong. They did it wrong. The Nordic model is wrong. It is partial criminalization. It is asymmetrical criminalization. But what it is not is decrim. That's what it is.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, just yes to everything. So I want to just say we're going to go a few minutes over. I hope everybody's okay with that. We won't go very long. I just, no, it's okay. I just want to make sure that everyone gets to say what they want to say. And if folks have to hop off, this is being recorded. So you'll be able to see the end of the panel if you aren't able to stay for a few minutes. So Kitty, let's have you go next.
All right. So yeah, kind of what I would like jump off what Femi was saying about like decrim, and I like fully agree that like decrim is decrim, and about the idea I've been talking to people about decrim lately, and journalists, and I've had journalists ask me like, well, can you consent? Like they think that because people are marginalized, they can't consent. I'm like, well, then do you think, you know, unless you're like, you know, and like one of the anti-sex feminists who thinks like every whatever, you know, then every heterosexual sex is no one can consent because of power differences, whatever. But I mean, there's people that are like writing this stuff that really think that like we can't consent to, you know, the basic things, that we don't deserve the right to be able to say, to be able to do the work that we want to do. And for this, I'm speaking about people that like want to do sex work, not as much as people that are doing it because there's not other options. It's hard because you got to like, I'm talking about like two worlds. Like one is like this world and one is kind of the world we're creating. And so like in this world, I think that it doesn't really like, you know, when it comes down to like, what's work? Is it not? I mean, I don't think it matters that much, or I think in terms of like, at the end of the day, like, is it, you know what I mean? Like, what do we need? Like, what's happening? I'm just like I tend to like not be super theoretical. I tend to be like, okay, well, what's going on? Like, how is this helpful? Like it to an extreme, to a much point, but where I'm like very just like figuring out materially, like, okay, what do we need for that? Like, how do we get there? And in terms of, and part of what you're talking about with these questions is part of, to get there, the world that we're building isn't just a world with decrim, it's a world without capitalism, it's a world without prisons, it's a world without, and like Femi was talking about, like it's intersectionality. And that's one of the things I love about disability justice, is that they talk like intersectionality is one of the tenets. So is interdependence, which is one of the things, you know, that Lorla, you'd brought up before, was being interdependent with each other. And that's a big value in disability and is a very anti-capitalist value. You know, another disability justice thing that Patty Byrne of Sins Invalid articulated is, you know, is anti-capitalism, is all these different things are part of that. So kind of to quickly like sum all that up in terms of, and kind of to go what some people were asking in terms about like socialism and different things like that. So there's two things that I look to kind of ground me politically in this, that to me like make a lot of sense and that are easy to grab onto, and that's disability justice. And it's also like abolition. So like prison and police abolition. So like, you know, Miriam Kaba, especially Dorothy Roberts, especially in disability justice. You have Leah Lakshmi Piepshna, Samara Singha, who's a friend of mine. You have Lydia Brown, another friend of mine. like a million people. I'll just stick with 2 each because I could go on forever. But just kind of, to me, I think that we don't necessarily need to stick to labor movement, and we don't need to stick to like looking to these like white dudes like Marx, like looking to these people. Like, we don't need to stick to them. We can if we want to, but we don't need to stick to them. They're not going to know stuff about our lives. They're not going to know stuff about how things are right now. They're not going to know what the best strategy is in our communities, in our neighborhoods, and how to keep each other safe.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely. Oh God, I love you guys so much. Mads, I'm excited to have you.
Hi. Can you read the question one more time? I just want to make sure I'm.
Yeah, so we're answering both of the last questions, and you should feel free to say whatever you want.
Yeah. I just want to remember what it was.
Yeah.
Goes along with my note here.
Okay, so the question is, regardless of whether work implies consent, work is central to public understandings of social membership in the United States, so much so that the legitimacy of one's claim to a job is often used as a proxy for legitimate claim to residency, as in when people say immigrants are stealing American jobs. So where does this leave people, like many of us who are disabled, who aren't or can't be part of what's traditionally understood as the workforce? Do we have to be workers to be part of the American social body? And then the last question was like, can we imagine a different way of calling for our liberation?
Yes, I can. It's crazy because when I read that question, the first thing that comes to my mind as a disabled sex worker is, yes, I can be productive. And I hate that word. Can we find a different word for productivity, please? But can I be productive as a disabled person in this society? Yes, I can if I have accommodations. Can you give me accommodations so I can, be productive? Sure, I can, as long as I have accommodations. Most of the time I don't. And I'm actually learning how to incorporate that into my daily life with no blueprints, no help. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I always have to be my own advocate. I have to build it from the ground up. The infrastructure from the ground up, everything. So yeah, when I think about that, I think about those words and what those mean to me, a disabled person, and able-bodied people. And especially since the pandemic, what we have shown, there's a lot of able-bodied people want to slow down too. Mm-hmm. And they're starting to see, oh, this is so weird. Like, we can work from home. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing this whole new vision. And you're seeing people talking about we're not going back to work. We want to work from home. So all of this is going on separate from us already. You know what I mean? And so we as disabled sex workers have already been doing this for a long time, finding the accommodations, talking about productivity or anti-productivity and how that would actually benefit people as a whole. And so just like anything, sex workers and disabled sex workers could lead the way in changing the entire society into visualizing a new way to quote unquote work.
Yes. Oh my God. I love that. I think that is a really
true.
Yeah. That's the perfect way.
Because we've been doing it. So we can just recreate the way the world sees work and how they work. And then they'll be like, wow, sex workers saved us. We should have listened to them all along. What was wrong with us?
Yeah. Oh God. It's so good. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much to everyone. This truly has been an amazing panel. And I also want to say it is not lost on me that there are a lot of luminaries in our chat. I am seeing people's names come up on the bottom of the screen, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Carol Lee is here. All of these other people are here. So I really want to also just say a big thank you to everyone in the audience. And I love that our chat seems to be I'm excited to read it. I can see that it is about the length of an academic paper. And I really, we're going to hopefully save the chat, Rachel. Rachel knows how to do the tech things. And so we'll have a copy of it available. And yeah, I think it's time to let everybody go. I'm so sorry we didn't have time for questions, but really, I mean, I think you guys have provided so much knowledge. So yeah, thank you so much. We'll say goodbye now. Femi's still in the chat. I see you.
Because somebody said something that was sounding real Orientalist, and I called them out, and now they want to go after somebody else, and it's not even that serious. Like, just sit down and reflect. It's not that serious. But don't go on some Eastern philosophy rant about like divine feminine bullshit. Don't do that. It's not looking good. Okay. And then like that Atlanta shooting just happened. You know, I grew up in Wisconsin. It's the third highest Hmong population in the country. A lot of people don't know that. And so I don't do the whole like weird Orientalist Eastern Enlightenment stuff. Like it's Orientalist. It's not, it's, you know, and if you didn't know, now you know. You know, be glad it was me who called you out, and be glad you didn't embarrass yourself.